The summer drought of 2025 stripped the Black Forest bare, exposing secrets that had slept beneath German soil for over a century. When the moss peeled away like old wallpaper, 3 human skeletons emerged in perfect formation, each one kneeling, each one facing the same direction, each one pierced through the jaw with a single iron nail. This discovery would unravel one of surveying's most enduring mysteries and force us to confront what happens when science meets something far older and more dangerous. The Black Forest stretches across southwestern Germany like a dark green scar, where towering spruces filter sunlight into cathedral dimness, and the air tastes of pine resin and ancient earth. Local hikers know the particular crunch of decades-old pine needles underfoot, the way morning mist clings to bark ridges, and how certain clearings seem to swallow sound entirely. It was in one such clearing, roughly 12 kilometers southeast of Baden-Baden, that forestry worker Klaus Brenner made his grisly discovery on July 15, 2025. Brenner had been documenting drought damage when he noticed unusual geometric patterns in the exposed soil. 3 metal objects, surveying tripods, their brass fittings green with age, stood in a perfect triangle. Each tripod pointed toward the center of the formation, where a single granite marker stone emerged from the cracked earth like a tombstone. The skeletons lay between the tripods and the stone. Forensic analysis would later confirm what local authorities suspected. These remains belong to the lost survey team of 1915, vanishing without explanation while mapping Roman road remnants for the Imperial German Archaeological Institute. The team, Heinrich Müller, Franz Weber, and Johann Krantz, had been experienced surveyors, men who understood the forest's dangers and carried proper equipment. They weren't the type to simply disappear, yet disappear they had, leaving behind only their meticulously maintained field notes and a growing sense of unease among their colleagues back in Stuttgart. The official search lasted 6 weeks. Teams combed every trail, every ravine, every abandoned hunting cabin. They found nothing. The men had vanished as completely as morning fog, leaving behind families, careers, and a mystery that would outlive everyone who searched for them. What made Klaus Brenner's discovery so disturbing wasn't just the positioning of the skeletons, though the deliberate kneeling posture suggested ritual rather than accident. It wasn't even the iron nails, driven with surgical precision through each jawbone. It was the tripods themselves, still perfectly aligned after more than a century, still pointing toward that central stone as if completing some arcane measurement that should never have been taken. Dr. Sarah Chen, the forensic anthropologist called to examine the remains, noted something else in her preliminary report. The bone wear patterns suggest these individuals remained in kneeling position for an extended period before death. This was not a quick execution. But execution by whom? And why had their surveying equipment been left undisturbed, arranged with the mathematical precision that only trained surveyors could achieve? The iron nails provide another puzzle. Chemical analysis revealed they were forged using techniques common in the late 1800s, decades before the survey team's disappearance. Someone had prepared these implements well in advance, waiting for the right moment, the right victims. Local folklore whispers about the Black Forest's darker history. Village elders still speak of the Vermessungsfluch, the surveyor's curse, warning that certain boundaries should never be mapped, certain measurements never taken. They claim the Romans knew this truth, that their roads deliberately avoided specific coordinates, following tortuous paths to sidestep something ancient and malevolent. The survey team's own notes, preserved in the Stuttgart Archaeological Archive, hint at growing unease during their final weeks. Heinrich Müller's last entry, dated August 20th, 1915, mentions persistent local warnings about our proposed survey route and unusual resistance from village guides who refuse payment to accompany us beyond certain landmarks. 3 days later, all communication ceased. What had the surveyors found in that clearing? What measurements had they attempted that required such precise positioning of their equipment? And why had someone, or something, ensured they would kneel there forever, silent sentinels guarding a secret that predates recorded history? The forest remembers everything. As investigators began cataloging the evidence, they discovered the most unsettling detail of all. The survey team's brass instruments were still functional after more than a century of exposure. The tripods showed no rust, no corrosion, as if they had been preserved by some force that modern science couldn't explain. Comment below and let us know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. If this mystery has grabbed your attention, hit that like button and subscribe, because what we uncover next about the surveyor's final measurements will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Black Forest. But first, we need to understand what brought Heinrich Müller and his team to that particular clearing in the first place, and why their archaeological sponsors were so desperate to map a Roman road that had been deliberately forgotten for over 1,000 years. The Imperial German Archaeological Institute received the commission in March of 1915, just as the Great War was consuming Europe's finest young men. Someone with considerable influence wanted that Roman road mapped, and they were willing to pay handsomely for work that would take surveyors deep into the Black Forest's most isolated reaches. This wasn't ordinary archaeological curiosity. This was desperation disguised as scholarship, and it would cost 3 men their lives. The project files, discovered in the Stuttgart Municipal Archive in 1987, reveal an unusual funding source. A private consortium led by Baron Friedrich von Steinberg, whose family had controlled vast timber holdings in the Black Forest for generations. Von Steinberg's official correspondence speaks of completing the historical record and furthering Germanic archaeological understanding. But his private letters tell a different story. Writing to Institute Director Professor Karl Hoffmann on February 8, 1915, von Steinberg confessed, "The logging crews refuse to work certain sections. They speak of cursed ground, of equipment that fails without explanation, of sounds in the forest that have no earthly source. I must know what lies beneath these roads, Professor. I must understand what my family has been avoiding for 3 centuries." The Steinberg family papers, sealed until 1995, contained maps dating back to the 1600s. Generation after generation of barons had marked the same area with increasingly desperate warnings. Forbidden to all timber operations. Workers report strange phenomena. Do not survey beyond the 3rd marker stone. Yet here was Friedrich von Steinberg, breaking his family's cardinal rule. The war economy demanded maximum timber production, and he could no longer afford to leave profitable sections unharvested based on what he called peasant superstitions. He needed scientific proof that nothing lay hidden beneath the forest floor. Heinrich Müller, the lead surveyor chosen for this task, had spent 15 years mapping Germany's most challenging terrain. His reputation for precision and reliability made him the Institute's automatic choice. Franz Weber brought expertise in Roman construction techniques, while Johann Krantz specialized in forest topography. Together, they represented the finest surveying team available to civilian authorities. Their assignment seemed straightforward: locate and map the complete route of an unnamed Roman road that appeared on medieval manuscripts but had never been properly documented. Preliminary research suggested the road connected two known Roman settlements, following what should have been a logical path through the Black Forest. But the road they found defied every principle of Roman engineering. Roman roads followed mathematical principles, straight lines wherever possible, gradual curves around natural obstacles, consistent width and construction materials. The road Müller's team discovered meandered through the forest like a wounded snake, sometimes doubling back on itself, sometimes narrowing to footpath width before expanding again without apparent reason. From Weber's field notes, dated July 22, 1915. The construction shows clear Roman craftsmanship, dressed stones, proper foundation layers, drainage channels. But the route itself appears deliberately inefficient. No Roman engineer would have designed such a path unless compelled by factors not visible to us. The team's early reports described mounting frustration. They were attempting to map a road that seemed to exist in defiance of logic, following terrain that offered no strategic or commercial advantage. Worse, local guides refused to accompany them beyond certain points, speaking in hushed tones about the old boundaries and places where Romans feared to tread. Village records from nearby Schwarzburg mention payments to protection guides as early as the 14th century, men who would accompany travelers only to specific landmarks before turning back. These guides passed their knowledge from father to son, maintaining an oral tradition of where safe passage ended and something else began. The boundaries never changed. Krantz documented this phenomenon in his survey journal. Today marks our 7th attempt to hire local assistance beyond the stone markers. Each guide becomes visibly agitated when shown our proposed route, claiming their grandfather's warnings forbid such travel. They speak of surveyors who vanished in previous decades, though village records show no evidence of such incidents. No evidence that survived anyway. By early August, the team had mapped roughly half the road's suspected route. Their progress reports grew increasingly terse, focusing on technical details while avoiding any mention of the growing unease evident in their private correspondence. Müller's wife received his final letter on August 18th. Between updates about survey progress and requests for supplies, he included a troubling observation. The forest changes beyond the marker stones. Franz claims the trees grow differently here, following patterns that suggest human influence from centuries past. Johann has documented magnetic anomalies that interfere with our compass readings. We proceed with scientific method, but I confess the local warnings weigh heavily on my mind. 3 days later, their field reports stopped arriving in Stuttgart. The search teams that followed found the surveyors' base camp intact, equipment neatly organized, field notes complete through August 20th. But the men themselves had vanished, along with their personal surveying instruments and the detailed measurements they had taken of the road's most remote section. They had reached the end of the documented route and begun mapping what lay beyond. What had they discovered in those final measurements? Why had someone been so desperate to silence their work that the evidence remained hidden for over a century? The answers waited in that moss-covered clearing, beneath iron nails and ancient stone. The surveying instruments found beside the 3 skeletons told a story more terrifying than murder. They revealed measurements that should never have been taken. Forensic teams finally decoded the brass theodolite's final readings. They discovered coordinates that mapped something far older and more dangerous than any Roman road. This wasn't archaeology gone wrong. This was precision engineering in service of something that demanded blood payment. Dr. Elena Richter, the surveying historian called to interpret the century-old instruments, made the first disturbing discovery on August 3, 2025. The theodolite's brass dial remained frozen at a specific bearing, 37 degrees, 14 minutes, 8 seconds northeast. This precise measurement pointed directly at the granite marker stone around which the skeletons knelt. But theodolites don't naturally lock into position. Someone had deliberately set this bearing and secured it there. The instrument shows clear signs of intentional calibration, Richter noted in her preliminary assessment. The brass screws have been over-tightened to prevent movement. This suggests the final measurement was considered critically important enough to preserve for posterity. The other surveying equipment told equally disturbing stories. Weber's measuring chain, found coiled beside his skeleton, bore scratch marks indicating it had been used repeatedly to measure the exact same distance, 17 meters and 43 centimeters from each tripod to the central stone. Mathematical analysis revealed this distance created a perfect equilateral triangle, geometry that required sophisticated planning. Krantz's leveling rod showed similar precision. Height measurements had been carved directly into the wooden surface using a surveyor's knife, recording the stone's elevation above sea level down to the centimeter. Someone had wanted these measurements preserved regardless of what happened to the men who took them. The positioning of the skeletons themselves suggested ritual knowledge of surveying practices. Each man knelt facing the central stone, but their heads were tilted at precise angles that aligned with specific celestial coordinates. Heinrich Müller faced due north. Franz Weber faced 37 degrees northeast, matching his theodolite's frozen bearing. Johann Krantz faced 74 degrees southeast. Together, their sight lines created a triangular pattern that matched the positioning of their surveying equipment. The iron nails through their jaws served a practical purpose beyond simple torture. Forensic reconstruction revealed that the nails had been driven at specific angles, forcing each skull into the exact position required to maintain the triangular alignment. Someone had used their deaths to create a permanent surveying station, a human monument to measurements that couldn't be allowed to change. But what were they measuring? The answer lay in the granite marker stone itself. Unlike the rough field stone common to the Black Forest, this monument had been precisely cut and positioned. Chemical analysis revealed granite from the Vosges Mountains, over 200 kilometers away, stone that had been transported at enormous expense and effort to mark this specific location. Carved symbols covered the stone's surface, worn smooth by centuries of weather, but still visible under proper lighting. The markings weren't Roman, despite the road's supposed origin. They predated Roman occupation by millennia, representing a mathematical system that European archaeologists were only beginning to understand. Dr. Marcus Schulze, the epigrapher brought in to translate the symbols, made a connection that sent chills through the investigation team. These markings represent geodetic coordinates, he explained during his August 15th briefing. Someone in prehistoric times had calculated this location's precise relationship to other significant sites across Europe. The mathematics involved suggest knowledge that shouldn't have existed for another 3,000 years. The symbols marked this clearing as a crucial intersection point, a place where ancient measurement systems converged with astronomical precision. Roman engineers had built their road to deliberately avoid this spot, following their characteristic superstition about disturbing pre-existing sacred sites. Heinrich Müller and his team had unwittingly completed measurements that ancient peoples had forbidden for good reason. Village elders from Schwarzburg had tried to warn them. Gottfried Zimmermann, whose family had guided travelers through the forest for 8 generations, approached Müller's team during their final week. His great-grandfather's journal, written in 1863, contained explicit warnings about the measuring place where stone remembers blood. According to Zimmermann family tradition, the Romans themselves had attempted to survey this location during their initial conquest of Germania. 3 Roman engineers vanished during that effort, found weeks later in the same kneeling position, though historical accounts described bronze spikes rather than iron nails. The pattern repeated itself across centuries. Medieval monks attempting to map monastery holdings lost surveyors to the same clearing. 18th-century cartographers working for various German princes suffered identical fates. Each time, the victims were found kneeling in precise formation, their surveying equipment arranged in the same triangular pattern. Each time, their measurements remained incomplete. The forest demanded blood sacrifice from those who tried to map its deepest secrets. But why had the 1915 survey team succeeded where others failed? What had they completed that cost them their lives but preserved their work for posterity? The answers lay in their final field notes, discovered not with their bodies but hidden in a place that suggested they knew death was approaching. Someone had prepared for their fate with the methodical precision that only trained surveyors could achieve. Hidden beneath decades of accumulated pine needles, their last measurements waited to reveal why some boundaries should never be crossed. Heinrich Müller had known they were going to die. The evidence lay buried beneath a carefully constructed cairn, 68 meters northwest of the kneeling skeletons. A surveyor's precision applied to his own final act of documentation. Inside a waterproofed leather satchel, investigators found the measurements that 3 men had died to protect, along with a revelation that changed everything we thought we knew about the Black Forest's ancient guardians. Forest archaeologist Dr. Petra Neumann discovered the cairn on August 20, 2025. Following metal detector readings that revealed brass instruments buried beneath decades of accumulated debris. The hiding spot wasn't random. Müller had positioned it at exact coordinates that created a perfect geometric relationship with the central stone and the 3 tripod positions. Even in preparing for death, he had maintained mathematical precision. The satchel contained Müller's private field journal, separate from the official survey notes sent regularly to Stuttgart. These personal observations revealed a growing awareness that their work was attracting unwanted attention from forces they couldn't identify or understand. From Müller's entry, dated August 15, 1915, Weber reports that our compass readings have become increasingly unreliable near the marker stone. Magnetic deviation suggests the presence of iron deposits beneath the clearing, but geological surveys show no such deposits exist. Something else is affecting our instruments, something that responds to the precision of our measurements. The journal documented escalating supernatural encounters. Surveying chains moved between sessions without human intervention. Theodolite readings changed overnight, despite locked mechanisms. Most disturbing, their carefully placed survey stakes disappeared entirely, only to reappear in new configurations that formed patterns matching the ancient symbols on the central stone. They were being watched by something that understood surveying better than they did. Krantz had attempted to document these phenomena scientifically. His sketches, preserved in the journal's back pages, showed the progression of stake movements over 5 consecutive nights. Each night, the wooden markers shifted position by exactly 17 centimeters, the same increment carved into the trees surrounding the clearing. Someone or something was fine-tuning their survey work. The journal's most chilling entry came from Weber, writing in Müller's book after his own field notes had mysteriously vanished. "We are not the first survey team to attempt measurements here. I discovered brass fittings buried near the eastern tripod position, instruments of a design used in the 1700s. The metal shows no corrosion despite 2 centuries of burial. Whatever preserves, these instruments also preserved their measurements, waiting for us to complete the work our predecessors began. The mathematical calculations found in the satchel revealed what that work entailed. Müller had discovered that the clearing served as a precise geodetic center point, a location from which exact measurements could be taken to dozens of similar sites across Germany and beyond. The ancient peoples who carved the stone had created a continent-spanning surveying network, using mathematics that modern science was only beginning to appreciate. But completing the network required specific conditions. The measurements had to be taken during particular astronomical alignments, by individuals whose blood would bind the calculations to the stones permanently. The iron nails weren't torture devices. They were surveying instruments, designed to maintain precise skull positioning that would allow the measurements to remain accurate across centuries. The men had realized their fate during the final week of survey work. Müller's last personal entry, dated August 20th, read simply, "We understand now what the Romans feared. This place demands completion of measurements that will connect ancient sites across the continent. Our deaths will serve as permanent markers, ensuring the calculations remain unchanged. We have prepared the evidence cache for those who will find us. May they learn from our precision what science cannot explain through theory alone." Below this entry, all 3 men had signed their names and recorded their final measurements with the methodical care that defined their profession. The hidden calculations revealed coordinates for 12 other sites within a 100-kilometer radius. Each location matched the position of medieval churches, Roman fortifications, or prehistoric stone circles. Each had been surveyed at some point during the past 2 centuries. Each had claimed the lives of survey teams who approached too close to completing the ancient network. Dr. Neumann's archaeological team began investigating these coordinates in September 2025. What they found confirmed the surveyors' worst fears. Buried beneath sites across the Black Forest region lay similar caches of surveying instruments, all positioned with the same geometric precision, all preserved by forces that modern science couldn't explain. The 1915 team hadn't discovered an isolated phenomenon. They had stumbled onto a surveying project that had been claiming lives for over 2,000 years, maintained by something that required blood sacrifice to preserve mathematical precision across geological time. Local residents knew parts of this truth. Emma Gross, whose farmhouse stood 3 kilometers from the clearing, remembered her grandmother's warnings about the watchers in the forest, entities that appeared whenever surveyors approached the forbidden coordinates. Grandmother said they looked like men wearing old-fashioned clothes, carrying instruments that gleamed too brightly in moonlight, Emma told investigators in her formal statement. They would watch survey work from the tree line, never interfering directly, but somehow the surveyors always ended up where they needed to be, where they needed to die. But who were these watchers? What intelligence had maintained this murderous precision for millennia? And why had the drought of 2025 finally exposed secrets that had remained hidden for over a century? The answers waited in the forest itself, where surveillance cameras would soon capture something that challenged every assumption about what lived among those ancient trees. The trail cameras installed around the clearing in September 2025 captured something that shouldn't exist: figures moving through the Black Forest with surveying instruments, working by moonlight with the methodical precision of trained professionals. These weren't hikers or amateur ghost hunters, and they certainly weren't alive by any definition modern science could accept. Dr. Klaus Hoffmann, the forensic investigator coordinating the site analysis, had placed 12 motion-activated cameras in a grid pattern around the clearing. standard protocol for documenting ongoing changes to an active crime scene, though this crime was over a century old. The cameras were positioned to capture any human interference with the evidence or unauthorized access to the restricted area. What they recorded defied every expectation. The first anomalous footage emerged on September 14th at 2:37 a.m. Camera 7, positioned northwest of the marker stone, detected movement and began recording. The infrared footage showed a tall figure in period clothing, dark wool coat, knee-high boots, wide-brimmed hat characteristic of early 20th century survey work. The figure carried a brass theodolite and moved with purposeful efficiency toward the exact spot where Heinrich Müller's skeleton had been found. The figure worked for 17 minutes, making precise adjustments to invisible equipment, checking measurements against calculations written on papers that appeared blank in infrared recording. Then it simply vanished, not walking away, not moving beyond camera range, but disappearing between one frame and the next. Camera 12 captured the same phenomenon 3 nights later. This time, 2 figures worked in coordination, one operating a measuring chain while the other recorded readings in a field notebook. Their movements showed the practiced efficiency of experienced surveyors, checking and rechecking measurements with obsessive precision. Both figures wore clothing consistent with 1915 fashion. The forensic team's initial assumption focused on hoax or deliberate interference. Someone with access to period costumes and surveying knowledge was staging these appearances, possibly to generate publicity or disrupt the investigation. But frame-by-frame analysis revealed details that challenged this explanation. The figures cast no shadows despite infrared illumination that should have created clear shadow patterns. Their breath produced no vapor clouds despite temperatures below freezing. Most disturbing, the surveying instruments they carried appeared to function without human operation. Theodolite adjustments occurred automatically. Measuring chains moved without visible manipulation. Dr. Sarah Blackwood, the digital forensics expert brought in to analyze the footage, found no evidence of digital manipulation or post-production editing. The timestamps are consistent, the file metadata shows no alterations, and the compression artifacts are uniform throughout each recording, she reported during the October 2nd briefing. Whatever these cameras recorded actually occurred in front of the lenses. The figures appeared with increasing frequency throughout October. Camera footage documented the same 3 individuals working night after night, following survey protocols with mechanical precision. They measured distances, recorded elevations, checked sight lines between the tripod positions and the central stone. Each session lasted exactly 17 minutes. Each session ended with the figures kneeling in the precise positions where the skeletons had been found. Voice activation software, designed to detect any sounds accompanying the visual recordings, captured something even more disturbing. The figures spoke to each other in period German dialect, discussing survey measurements and technical calculations. Linguistic analysis confirmed the speech patterns matched regional dialects from the early 1900s. The voices belonged to Heinrich Müller, Franz Weber, and Johann Krantz. Translation of the recorded conversations revealed the dead surveyors were continuing their work, night after night, refining measurements they had died to complete. They discussed corrections to bearing calculations, debated the precise positioning of survey markers, argued about mathematical formulas with the passionate intensity of living professionals. From the October 9th recording, translated from period German, Heinrich, the eastern bearing shows deviation of 3 arc seconds. We must adjust the stone position before the alignment window closes. Franz is correct. Johann, reset the measuring chain. We have until dawn to complete this iteration. They were trapped in an eternal survey project, doomed to repeat their final measurements with supernatural precision. Dr. Richter, the surveying historian, recognized the terrible logic. Survey work requires obsessive attention to detail, she explained to the investigation team. These men died while focused entirely on achieving perfect measurements. Death hasn't released them from that obsession. It has intensified it beyond human limitations. The cameras captured other figures as well. Survey teams from different historical periods appeared sporadically, working alongside Müller's group or independently. Roman engineers in bronze armor checked calculations using ancient instruments. Medieval monks in rough robes measured distances with knotted ropes. 18th-century cartographers in powdered wigs operated brass equipment that gleamed like new despite centuries of supposed burial. All of them worked with the same mechanical precision. All of them disappeared at dawn. Local residents had known about the nightly activities for generations. Margaret Schultz, whose cottage bordered the forest, admitted she had seen lights moving among the trees for over 60 years. My mother warned me never to investigate the surveyor lights, she told investigators. She said they belonged to men who couldn't rest until their work was finished. But the work was never finished. Each night brought the same measurements, the same calculations, the same obsessive attention to mathematical precision that had cost them their lives. Death had transformed professional dedication into supernatural compulsion. The cameras revealed one final, chilling detail. The ghostly surveyors weren't working alone. Something else moved through the forest during their sessions. A presence that remained just beyond camera range, but whose influence was unmistakable. The surveying equipment adjusted itself. Measurements changed without human intervention. And sometimes, when the dead men's calculations strayed from acceptable parameters, their movements became jerky and unnatural, as if controlled by an external force that demanded absolute precision. Something in the Black Forest was directing this eternal survey work, using the trapped souls of dead surveyors to complete measurements that served a purpose beyond human understanding. What that purpose entailed would become clear only when the final camera captured something that modern geology insisted was impossible. The forest itself changing shape to accommodate mathematical requirements that predated human civilization. On November 8, 2025, seismic monitoring equipment detected movement that shouldn't exist. The gradual reshaping of the Black Forest's topography to accommodate mathematical precision demanded by forces older than recorded history. The ground itself was adjusting to serve measurements that required geological accuracy beyond human engineering capabilities. This wasn't erosion or natural subsidence. This was the Earth actively participating in a surveying project that spanned millennia. Dr. Andreas Weber, the geological surveyor monitoring soil stability around the clearing, first noticed the anomalies during routine elevation checks. His GPS readings showed subtle but consistent changes in ground height across the entire site. What had measured as level terrain in September now showed variations of up to 12 centimeters, differences that exceeded normal seasonal soil movement by factors of 10. The changes followed mathematical patterns that matched the ancient symbols carved into the central stone. The elevation shifts are occurring in precise geometric progressions, Weber reported during the November 10th briefing. Areas measured by the camera-documented survey teams show exact corrections that align with theoretical mathematical models. The Earth is reshaping itself to match survey calculations. Ground-penetrating radar revealed the mechanism behind these changes. Deep beneath the forest floor, a network of hollow chambers extended in perfectly straight lines, connecting the clearing to coordinates throughout the region. These chambers contracted and expanded in response to atmospheric pressure changes, causing the surface elevation to rise and fall with mechanical precision. The chambers hadn't been excavated by human hands. Their walls showed geological stratification, indicating natural formation over thousands of years. Yet their positioning followed surveying principles that required advanced mathematical knowledge. Someone or something had guided geological processes to create an underground infrastructure supporting precision measurements across vast distances. Time-lapse photography documented the surface changes in progress. Trees moved with their root systems as underground chambers shifted, maintaining their relative positions while the entire forest adjusted to new elevations. What appeared to be random wilderness revealed itself as a carefully orchestrated landscape designed to support surveying work across centuries. The camera footage showed the ghostly surveyors responding to these changes in real time. When ground elevations shifted, the dead men adjusted their instruments accordingly, recalculating bearings and distances with supernatural awareness of the geological modifications. They worked in perfect coordination with forces that operated beyond the visible spectrum. Dr. Elena Richter made the connection that explained the larger pattern. The entire Black Forest region serves as a massive surveying instrument, she explained during her November 15th presentation. The clearing where we found the skeletons is just one node in a network that extends across Central Europe. Each node requires precise maintenance, performed by survey teams who died completing their measurements. Historical research confirmed this theory. Medieval church records mentioned the wandering surveyors who appeared near construction sites, ensuring that religious buildings were positioned according to mathematical principles that connected them to older, pagan sites. Renaissance cartographers reported similar encounters while mapping territories for various German princes. Each time, the surveyors completed their work and vanished, leaving behind measurements that proved uncannily accurate decades or centuries later. The underground chamber network explained how this precision was maintained. The chambers formed a continent-spanning geodetic system, allowing measurements taken at one location to influence calculations hundreds of kilometers away. Changes in elevation, magnetic declination, or astronomical alignment at any node automatically propagated through the system, triggering corresponding adjustments at connected sites. But the system required blood sacrifice to function properly. Human surveyors who approached too close to completing the network found themselves compelled to provide the final measurements that would bind their spirits to the work permanently. Death transformed professional skill into supernatural precision, creating guardian entities capable of maintaining mathematical accuracy across geological time. The November footage captured the moment when this terrible truth became undeniable. Camera 8 recorded a living surveyor, Dr. Weber himself, approaching the central stone with his modern GPS equipment. As he began taking elevation readings, the ghostly figures of Müller, Franz Weber, and Krantz surrounded him, their movements growing increasingly agitated. The dead men gestured toward Weber's equipment, pointing to specific readings on his digital display. When he failed to understand their communications, one of the spirits, Heinrich Müller, reached toward the GPS unit with translucent fingers. The device immediately began displaying coordinates that didn't match Weber's actual position. Instead, it showed measurements for locations across Europe, scrolling through elevation data and bearing calculations for sites Weber had never visited. The GPS had been converted into a window showing the entire surveying network from a perspective that transcended physical space. Weber's own words, recorded by camera audio, revealed his growing comprehension. "They're showing me the complete system, every surveying project across Central Europe for the past 2,000 years. all connected, all measured to the same mathematical standard, all maintained by... The recording ended when Weber dropped his equipment and ran from the clearing. Later analysis of his abandoned GPS unit revealed stored data for over 300 coordinate positions, each marked with elevation readings accurate to within millimeters. These weren't random locations. They corresponded to archaeological sites, medieval churches, Roman fortifications, and prehistoric stone circles across Germany, France, Switzerland, and Austria. Each site had claimed the lives of survey teams. Each site was maintained by their trapped spirits. Each site served as a node in a measurement network, designed for purposes that human science was only beginning to comprehend. The forest had revealed its secret. It was an ancient machine, powered by human sacrifice and maintained by supernatural precision, serving mathematical requirements that predated civilization itself. But who had designed this machine? What intelligence required such exact measurements across such vast distances? And why had the drought of 2025 triggered its exposure after centuries of successful concealment? The answers waited in the final revelation, a discovery that would force investigators to confront the possibility that the Black Forest's mysterious surveyors were preparing for something that modern astronomy insisted couldn't happen for another 1,000 years. The astronomical calculations hidden within the surveying network revealed a countdown to an event that modern astronomy insisted was impossible. A planetary alignment scheduled for December 21st, 2025, requiring precision measurements that could only be achieved through supernatural means. The dead surveyors weren't trapped in endless repetition. They were preparing for something that demanded absolute mathematical perfection when the planets aligned in configurations that occurred once every 26,000 years. Dr. Astrid Hoffmann, the archaeoastronomer brought in to analyze the coordinate patterns, made the discovery that changed everything. Working backwards from the GPS coordinates found in Weber's abandoned equipment, she identified the astronomical purpose behind centuries of surveying deaths. The measurement network creates a terrestrial map of celestial mechanics, she explained during the emergency briefing on December 1st. Each surveying node corresponds to specific star positions during the winter solstice. The entire system is designed to channel astronomical forces through precise geographical coordinates. The calculations were staggering in their complexity. Ancient mathematicians had somehow determined that specific locations on Earth would achieve perfect alignment with stellar positions during the 2025 winter solstice. These weren't approximations or close estimates. The measurements required precision down to individual centimeters across distances spanning hundreds of kilometers. Human surveyors alone couldn't achieve such accuracy. The network needed supernatural precision maintained by spirits bound to their work through blood sacrifice. The camera footage from early December showed the ghostly surveyors working with increasing urgency. Their nightly sessions extended beyond the usual 17-minute duration, sometimes lasting until dawn. Their movements grew more frantic, their calculations more complex. They were approaching a deadline that transcended mortal concerns. Translation of their recorded conversations revealed the mounting pressure. Heinrich, the alignment window narrows with each passing night. We must achieve perfect calibration before the solstice conjunction. Franz speaks truth. The calculations show deviation of 2 arcseconds in the northeastern array. We cannot permit such error when the stars align. But perfect calibration required one final element: a living surveyor willing to complete the network by joining their ranks permanently. The December footage captured something that federal authorities immediately classified as restricted evidence. On the night of December 7th, the cameras recorded a new figure approaching the clearing. a person in modern clothing carrying contemporary surveying equipment. Unlike the ghostly apparitions, this figure cast shadows and left footprints in the frost-covered ground. Someone was responding to the supernatural summons. Voice analysis of the audio recording identified the newcomer as Dr. Andreas Weber, the geologist who had fled the clearing weeks earlier. He returned with advanced GPS equipment and laser measurement devices, tools that could achieve the precision the ancient network demanded. The ghostly surveyors welcomed him with visible relief. Heinrich Müller's spirit gestured toward specific coordinate positions, while Franz Weber's shade pointed to elevation calculations that required modern equipment to complete. They had been waiting over a century for surveying technology advanced enough to finish their work. Weber worked with mechanical precision, taking measurements and recording data with the focused intensity of someone operating under supernatural compulsion. His movements grew increasingly jerky and unnatural as the night progressed, suggesting external control over his actions. The cameras captured his final words. "I understand now. The network requires completion before the alignment peaks. The measurements must be perfect when the stars reach conjunction. I can provide the precision they need." At exactly 3:43 a.m., Weber knelt in the center of the triangle formed by the three original skeletons. He positioned his modern equipment with mathematical exactness, creating a 4-point measurement array that achieved perfect geometric balance. Then he drove an iron nail through his own jaw. The cameras recorded 27 minutes of convulsions before Weber's body went still, his modern instruments still clutched in his hands. His GPS display showing coordinates that pulsed in rhythm with readings from surveying nodes across the continent. The network was complete. Seismic monitoring detected immediate changes across the entire region. Underground chambers that had remained stable for centuries began shifting in coordinated patterns. Ancient stone markers emerged from soil that hadn't been disturbed since Roman times. Trees throughout the Black Forest adjusted their positions to accommodate sightlines that connected distant archaeological sites with mathematical precision. The Earth itself was preparing for the alignment. Dr. Hoffman's final calculations revealed the terrifying scope of what was approaching. When the planets achieved perfect conjunction on December 21st, the surveying network would channel their combined gravitational forces through precise geographical coordinates. The mathematical focus would create effects that conventional physics couldn't predict or prevent. Ancient peoples had built this system to harness astronomical events that modern science barely understood. They had designed it to operate across millennia, maintained by the trapped souls of those skilled enough to provide the necessary precision. Now, after 26,000 years of preparation, the network was ready to activate. Federal authorities evacuated the Black Forest region on December 15th, citing geological instability as the official reason. Satellite monitoring detected energy readings that didn't match any known natural phenomena. Magnetic field fluctuations disrupted electronic equipment across Central Europe. Something vast and ancient was awakening beneath the forest floor. Local residents reported seeing processions of ghostly figures moving through the trees. Not just the survey teams, but entire populations of spirits drawn to witness an event that had been planned since before recorded history began. They carried instruments from every era of human civilization, working together to ensure perfect mathematical precision when the planets aligned. The December 20th footage showed Weber's newly deceased spirit joining the Eternal Survey team, his modern equipment integrated seamlessly with centuries-old brass instruments. 4 surveyors now maintained the network's precision, their combined skills spanning from Roman engineering to contemporary satellite technology. They worked through the final night with supernatural intensity, making minute adjustments to calculations that would determine whether the alignment succeeded or catastrophically failed. The cameras stopped recording at exactly 11:59 p.m. on December 20th. At dawn on December 21st, search teams found the clearing empty except for surveying equipment arranged in perfect geometric formation and a new granite marker stone that hadn't existed the day before. The stone bore fresh carved symbols indicating successful completion of measurements that had required over 2,000 years to achieve. Even now, hikers report seeing lights moving through the Black Forest on clear winter nights, as if something vast continues surveying the darkness between the stars. Local legends claim that the next planetary alignment won't occur for another 26,000 years, but the surveyors will be waiting, counting down the days with supernatural precision until the stars call them to work once more. We're only scratching the surface. The next case is even darker. Subscribe before it drops.